Welcome to the All India Forum for Right to Education webinar series. In that series, it is the 12th which we are now having today. And our honorable guest for this is Professor Chakradhar Rao, who has been a long experience of teaching as well as of organizing the things, and one who is very learned on the education policy issues. So it is the 12th webinar in the series, and I will request Dr. Chakradhar Rao to make his presentation. And we have a Ramurthy with us. I will request him to translate that into Hindi, a summary of that as Dr. Chakradhar Rao. And it is also request for the participants and those who are, it is live on the website. Our Facebook live is there on the AIFRT page. So people can join there. You can put your questions there or in the chat so that we could have a discussion later on this. So I invite Professor Chakradhar Rao to give us a presentation or his critical appraisal of NEP 2020. Welcome, Professor Chakradhar Rao. You are invited to join with it.
Thank you, Professor Jagmohan Singh ji. And friends, I am happy to share some of my views on NEP 2020 with you this evening. National Education Policy 2020 document has been released by the Ministry of HRD, now Ministry of Education, Government of India, on I think 29th of July. After a long series of issuing a long series of drafts on this. So when I looked at, there are about 6 earlier drafts which have been circulated by the ministry and invited responses from the people and organizations, etc. So finally, when the policy document came out, there are significant changes between the earlier drafts and the final policy document. As I look into the policy document, there are a lot of contradictions, inconsistencies, and incoherence in the document. Sometimes there is a tinge of dubious and deceptive ness in the document. If someone who is not very much knowledgeable about education policies and reads this policy document now for the first time, he will be overtaken by many impressions. So this document so makes pronouncements on many principles and values which usually are found in the liberal and sometimes progressive deliberations. So people may think the document appears to be a very good document, pro people, and they are interested in providing universal education to all the people in the country. But when we go deep into the various pronouncements in the document, and when we examine the intent behind many propositions in the document, there is a big gap between the two. And a third one, I want to look at the propositions in the document and the real intent of the policymakers and the reality that is there in practice when most of them are already in practice, they are being pursued. So after the neoliberal globalization, privatization and liberalization policies were introduced in 1991, the previous governments, particularly the Congress or UPA government, started implementing the neoliberal framework and policies in education as well, apart from the economy and other areas. So, but the NDA government, after it came to power, started continuing those policies with more vigor and commitment. This particular policy document, National Education Policy, takes the education in India to a higher trajectory of the not only the neoliberal policies, but something more which I will discuss later. I would like to look at some aspects of this policy, as I said, from three angles. One, the pronouncements in the policy document. Two, we'll try to look at the real intent beside this pronouncement and what is happening in reality when they are already pursuing these policies to some extent. Of course, there may be newer aspects, but some of them they have been implementing already. So the first aspect I want to look at is there is no serious commitment to rejuvenation, strengthening and developing the public education system in India. No such commitment is seen in the document. So they said public education will be there and they have proposed certain reforms and changes, but they have not mentioned anywhere that public education is very crucial for the development of the country, economy, and people. So therefore, high priority will be given to public education like that. So the public education system, which has been built up after independence, is now in a crisis. And because of the policies that the governments have been pursuing, but nowhere the document says this crisis will be addressed and the problems facing the education system will be solved, and a vibrant public education system will be developed. That kind of assurance is not there in the document. Of course, they have made many statements like universal access to quality education, equitable access to high quality education. These kinds of things they have said now and then in the document, but a clear commitment to the strengthening of public education is not found in the document. Instead, so therefore, development, in reality, what is closer to reality is their pronouncement that philanthropic, public-spirited, private institutions of learning, both in school and school education and higher education, so will be encouraged and supported. So this is a dubious statement. In the days of rapid progress of corporate education, not even so the earlier private education, but corporates are taking over the education system from the small operators, small schools, small colleges, etc. So that is for profit. They are running, establishing, investing money, establishing and running them for profit. So in the process of commercialization of education, they are taking the commercialization further. So in these days, if the document speaks of philanthropic and public-spirited private agencies and promoters of education, it's a myth actually. So in reality, it is the private investors and corporate organizations which are now entering and establishing education institutions in a big way. Therefore, this is the reality, which is seen in actual practice also. Therefore, the hope that higher education, public education may get a boost in the new education policy appears to be a myth. Then the second thing I want to mention is the Right to Education Act. So the Children's Right to Free, Compulsory and Universal Education Act came into being in 2009 after a long, prolonged demands from public and deliberations in the courts and the parliament. So court's judgment, Supreme Court's judgment, and then amendment to the Constitution, and then enactment of this Right to Education Act in 2009, process of public organizations, and then public representatives, etc. So, but the perfunctory reference just is there to the Right to Education Act in this, but nowhere in this document we find a reassertion and the reassurance of implementing of course, the Act has its own deficiencies, but then at least as the Act exists, the government, which earlier government brought it, but the present government doesn't say the right further strengthened in no way. Therefore, education as a fundamental right, as the Constitution says, as a right in the Act. So all this is going to be made a myth actually. So no more the country may have, I don't know, the Act will continue because there will be many changes in the provisions of the Act, and therefore either the Act has to be revised, modified, or amended, or what they are going to do, we don't know. Then the structure of school education, they are going to change from 10+2 school education. So restructuring, they are proposing 5+3+3+4. So if found necessary, a semester system also can be introduced into this restructured school education system. So I don't know whether this we have to discuss further and deliberate. This new framework of school education will really serve the purpose of increasing. So what they call inclusiveness, quality education, etc. In fact, this structure together with vocationalization, which they are proposing from the 6th grade onwards, they together will they lead to big dropouts at the terminal level, that is at the stage of 5-year education, or 5+3 stage of education, or 5+3+3. This kind of different terminal stages are there. So wherein there is a danger of many students, poor and marginalized caste students, socially marginalized students from the sections may drop out. That kind of danger is there. So we have to really further examine this, deliberate on this, and make our position clear. And then teachers conditions must be improved. Teacher plays a very crucial role in shaping the future of the students, and thus the future of the nation, they say. But as we are seeing, this is a very, very formal statement. No real commitment we see, because in actual practice, what is happening is, firstly, there are no recruitments. Lakhs of teacher positions are vacant at the school level and higher education. And secondly, a system of appointing contract teachers, private teachers, teacher volunteers, academic consultants, with so many names. Part-time teachers are being appointed who are not being regularized, and school teachers, most of them are not continued during summer vacations, and they are not paid salaries regularly. So this kind of thing, during the COVID lockdown, we saw so many teachers going without salaries, and they lost their jobs, and they are taking up all kinds of work. So even laborers work, the farming work. So a teacher in my village was working in the petrol bunk to fill the petrol, diesel in the vehicle. So like that, whatever work with a little income they are getting, they are doing. It is nearly 6 months they are not being called to the schools. So therefore, in these days of neoliberal policies, the teachers became an exploited class of workers. They're academic workers, highly qualified people compared with other laborers in the market. They are more educated, but they are getting less compensation as salaries, etc. So this is a form of exploitation which is not addressed in the policy. Then the schools, primary schools, upper primary schools, which was started in the neighborhoods, that is habitations. So to more than one primary school in a village, 2 or 3, sometimes 4 also are there in different neighborhoods in the village. So they are in a crisis now because of falling student strength, enrollment. So why this is happening? For 2 things. Actually, the government is not agreeing, but because they are giving, permitting private schools in the same village or neighboring villages, and they are coming and taking the children to their school. That is the major cause of falling enrollment in the schools, whether primary, upper primary, or high schools also. Second thing is adequate teachers and other infrastructure have not been developed. So therefore, they are telling on the standards of education in these schools. So it is the governments which are responsible for the falling enrollment and strength, student strength in these schools. Once when they were started, actually, so some time ago, some 10 to 15 years ago, all these schools were having very good enrollments. So when these neighborhood schools, what is called, in 3 or 4 localities in the village. When they were started, they got good strength because at that time there were no private schools around them, and then the teachers were appointed and they were teaching well. They are imparting good quality education. Therefore, parents were sending their children to the schools. But now the enrollment has gone down. So the remedy, instead of stopping permitting private schools nearby the existing government schools and strengthening the infrastructure and teacher appointments, etc., in the school, they are thinking of a worse alternatives, that is school complexes and clusters. So thereby, it will lead to closing down of many thousands or lakhs of primary schools and upper primary schools, even high schools. And they are calling them merger or whatever, so rationalization, etc. But what will be the consequence? There will be big dropout of students who were going to their habitation school earlier. Now, particularly girl children, the poor children, and the children belonging to SC, ST, etc., whose parents may prefer them to put in child labor rather than sending them to a distant place to the school complexes and clusters, etc. Therefore, the proposition that school complexes and clusters will increase educational opportunities, resources will be efficiently used, and teachers will be fully there, complete cadre of teachers will be there, subject teachers, etc., is a myth actually. So we should oppose this policy proposition in the document. Now going to the universities, so they have made certain proposals. So they said there should be 3 kinds of universities: research universities, degree higher education institutions. So these 3 kinds of higher education institutions. So ultimately, they say every institution will become autonomous. Of course, universities are conceptually autonomous, but even the higher education institutions, the degree colleges, etc., also should become autonomous, and there will be no affiliated colleges to the universities. And these autonomous institutions should award their degrees to the students. This kind of reforms are proposed, and we should look at the centralized concept, the centralization of decision making and management powers in the education, along with universities also, because universities are becoming now victims of this high degree of centralization. The concept of university traditionally has been totally different from what this policy document looks at. So it is a totally autonomous institution, autonomous from the governments, so that government and its agencies will not interfere with the working of the university in any way, but will just provide funds as approved in the legislature, state legislatures or parliament, etc. Then the university will have internal democracy. It will have umpteen a number of organizations inside, like the executive councils, the academic senates, and then the departmental councils, etc. So many organizations are there which deliberate on the policies within the university and take decisions. So it is a highly a democratic kind of structure that university, even when the monarchies were there, dictatorships were there, universities enjoyed this autonomy and internal democracy and academic freedom, freedom of ideas and expression, freedom of dissent and criticism. All these things are very crucial for a university, but now they are all being taken away. Autonomy just for running the university or higher education institution. So with all its functions like teaching, research, and conducting examinations, awarding degrees, etc., evaluation, etc. Therefore, this kind of autonomy which they are speaking is not at all the correct kind of autonomy, and the the working of the universities which the document is looking at is not the right kind of approach. So, and high degree of centralization. The universities are subjected to high degree of centralization of decision making. Like there is a general education council, and there are 7 or 8 other organizations like National Accreditation Council, and then National Higher Education Qualification Framework. So many. So all these will be controlling the working of the universities in the country. So the autonomy will be just a myth, actually. So just now itself, we are seeing universities, particularly in the states where universities are funded by the state legislatures. Autonomy, there is no more any autonomy. Government, the political agencies and the administrative agencies are trying to interfere and control the working of the working processes of the university, so which we are seeing now. So, and the education structure, the 3-year degree and 4-year degrees which the students pursue, and will get certificate or degree at the end of one. If they drop out at the end of the first year or second year or third year they will get the degree, and 4 years honors course. There also if they pursue the 4 years program, they can get a postgraduate degree, like this kind of thing. And particularly the aspect of multi the universities are proposed to become big multi courses. Actually, what they called it is I'm sorry. multidisciplinary centers where a student should not stick to a related subjects only in a degree. One can choose any subject. So having chosen a subject like economics, he can go to physics or he can go to mathematics to have a combination of courses in the multidisciplinary. So they are giving undue emphasis on this. With this, I think the purpose of so going for higher education, which will provide him to look at the disciplines which are related, will go actually. Unrelated subjects one will be pursuing, and thereby he will not be having a coherent idea of the branch of knowledge he is pursuing. So this has to be examined further, and we should make the necessary suggestions. And then internationalization of education. So in this document, they have proposed that internationally reputed universities should be invited, at least 100 universities should be invited to establish campuses in our country. And then, so we are seeing already some institutions are coming, and they are not necessarily reputed universities. They come to establish campuses and make money actually. It's a commercial activity, part of the commercial process, commercialization of education. And therefore, we can't also say that there will be quality education which will be imparted in these foreign universities. Therefore, opening up the country for foreign institutions is not at all a desirable thing. And of course, the invite World Bank through STARS project, etc., and the strategy paper which the World Bank has issued, we have to look into how it proposes to influence the policy making in the various countries. So it should have its own independent education policy, not influenced by any external forces for their own to further their own interest. So the government of India is now talking of Atmanirbhar Bharat. This is talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat on the one side, and talking of internationalizing education, opening up of education, which the GATS of WTO was emphasizing. That they are now implementing actually. So that was not approved actually, this opening up of education. So they want to implement now, and the World Bank interference in education policy formulation also is not desirable. They will not be in the interest of our country and different classes and sections of people. So therefore, this internationalization of education, higher education particularly, is not at all desirable. So their statement that it will strengthen, it will improve standards, they will provide quality education, world-class education, etc. They are a myth actually. In reality, they will exploit the students and their parents, and with high fees and not so quality education. So they are not at all desirable. Then technology. The policy document gives puts a lot of emphasis on use of technology in education. That's okay. So making students and teachers knowledgeable in technology and using them for strengthening their pursuits is okay. But the government of India wants to put undue emphasis on technology use, where like online education and digital education. So this is, it looks as though they want to substitute the present classroom teaching, face-to-face direct teaching by teachers to the students. They want to replace it with online education and digital education, etc. That is not at all desirable. So this face-to-face teaching will be totally different from what the classes are being held online and through digital process. As a limited modules will be prepared and they will be telecast or broadcast through the TV or mobiles and satellite TVs, etc. So the students will get limited knowledge. That's one thing. Second is there will be no community interaction. So the interaction between teacher and student and between student and student. So, and then inequalities. Now the new, present education policy will promote new inequalities actually, but through this technology divide or digital divide. So large number, so 80% of the people, more than 80% belong to the marginalized sections like SCs, STs, these OBCs and girl children and minorities, etc., who most of them do not afford purchasing the equipment that is required to participate in these kind of classes. And government really cannot provide these equipment and facilities to all the children because they will be in lakhs. So therefore, students will keep away from these classes. They will be forced to keep away from this class. They will not be able to participate in them. Thereby, standards will be affected. So like this, so a technological divide, inequality. And then access to education will also be reduced and dropouts also may be there, like that. This overemphasis on technology and digital education should not be there. It may be a supplementary thing to the main process of teaching and learning, but not a major part of the education system. And then regarding financing education, so the document says the resources for strengthening education and improving standards, providing infrastructure, etc., has to be increased. So from the present level of about 4.4% of the GDP to 6%. And then the percentage of budget allocations also should be increased from the present 10 to 20%. But as privatization is being pursued and schools are being closed, schools, even colleges, universities in Telangana are in a very bad shape. Their grants are cut drastically. So if they are at the edge of closure, actually, even universities, therefore, the talk of providing higher amount of resources, budgetary resources, I don't know. Earlier they did not do it. Now also we have to see, will it be an empty talk or they will try to increase the budgetary allocations. Another important thing is social justice. The social justice aspect, which is a very important component of the Constitution. So in the preamble and in the directive principles, etc. So it emphasizes on social justice along with economic and political. So in our country, we have a special kind of social structure in which many costs are being marginalized, gender, women also, and minorities, etc. So marginalized costs like SCs, STs, etc. So nowhere in the document they mention the marginal names of the marginalized sections. They just say marginalized sections or socially and economically deprived sections, something like that. So a broad kind of categories they mention, but specific categories who are being deprived of education in the existing dispensation, they do not mention that at all. And then the reservation in admissions to higher education institutions, and then recruitment of teachers and other staff in the schools and colleges and universities. So the reservation, they don't mention at all. That means we have to think that they are doing away with reservations. And the existing other facilities that are being provided to these marginalized sections, they are, I think, being built. And so therefore, denial of social justice is a main issue in the national education policy, which we have to oppose and see that it is incorporated in the policy. And then the last point I want to mention is communalization and saffronization of education. So the trend now is, since a few centuries, the West has tried to develop secular education. So education derived from the communal and religious processes. And that kind of education we have imbibed before the before independence, and we are continuing with that. But now they want to communalize and saffronize the education in a big way. So the document says at many places that we have to, the guiding principle of this policy, education policy, will be the heritage, the great heritage of India, culture, traditions, the knowledge, the great knowledge we have developed in the ancient India, and the Sanskrit language, which is a classical language in which there is a vast body of knowledge. So this kind of, Indian ethos in which we take pride, and these kinds of things are there in the document in many places. If we put them together, the intent behind them is to introduce the communal aspects, because the Hindutva aspects in that. So they want, earlier also they have tried to introduce courses in the universities, and now I think taking cue from these statements in the policy, they will introduce many courses like Vedic mathematics, astrology, this and that, which are against scientific temper. They mention scientific temper in the document, but on the other hand, they are promoting this kind of thing. So, it is against secular education. So the need is to develop secular, democratic, humane education. So the conclusion from the points which I discussed is the decline and destruction of public education will continue during the regime of the new policy, and commercialization of education will be promoted in a big way, more than what is happening now. They say education is a public good, but actually they are making it a private good by making it, marketizing it and privatizing it. So I want to take 5 more minutes to conclude my presentation. Why this kind of approach is there to education by the NDA government led by the BJP. So for this, I find one main reason, that is, there are 2 perspectives and approaches to education in this country from the earlier period to the present. One is the dominant mainstream approach, perspective and approach. And another is the alternative people-oriented egalitarian approach. So, democratic and secular education, etc. So this first mainstream approach consists of the Brahminical perspective and approach, which was the first one. So during which the education was limited to a very small minuscule of people in the country. So only the male members of the 3 upper varnas, dominant varnas, that is the Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. Their women also were not allowed to pursue education. So if we want to understand this, we can understand better by reading Manusmriti, in which they say the Shudras and women are not eligible for education. Education is banned to them. So if they pursue education, they will be punished. So, and that was based, the Gurukul type of education in Brahmanism was guided by principles like inequality, domination, exclusion, discrimination, denial, etc. And the same continued when feudalism developed in this country. As part of the Brahmanism itself. It was Brahmanical feudalism, in which upper castes became the feudals, landlords, and ruling princes, kings, etc., monarchs. And the Shudras and the ex-untouchables, the Ati-Shudras, the Girijans, etc., became the peasantry under the landlords. So the monarchs and landlords did not allow the lower caste workers and peasants to gain education. The same tradition continued. So the same approach continued during the, so it was Brahmanical feudalism. Then the colonial system came. They compromised with the Brahmanical system, and the upper Varnas were benefiting more from the British education institutions. In South India, we saw there was a justice movement in which they said the people belonging to 95% are not getting educational opportunities, therefore special provisions should be made, etc. They represented to the British government and they provided. So in the dominant mainstream approach, so the Brahmanical system and the Brahmanical feudal system, the colonial system, and then the capitalist system which developed with the advent of Europeans and the Britishers, that also followed an elitistic approach. So they also provided education to a limited people. Now we are seeing with the advent of neoliberal capitalist system, the education is again limited to a small number of people. So therefore, the same principles are continuing from Brahmanical system. The inequalities, the exclusion, discrimination, denial, etc. Those principles are continuing throughout, because in India there is a specific characteristic of social transformation. In other countries, when a new socio-economic system developed, the earlier system got disintegrated and declined, disappeared actually. So you take Europe and other countries. But in India, the Brahmanical caste system is continuing, and in that the feudal system also developed, and they both got integrated, the caste system and feudalism. And then when capitalism developed, capitalism also got integrated with the feudal relations, and then the Brahmanical caste system, etc. So Varna caste system is a socio-economic system, a total socio-economic system like feudalism and capitalism. It's not an institution as people are thinking. So it's not just a social institution. So this is the dominant mainstream approach, which is denying education to a large percentage of people in this country, and they are working with a principle of exclusion and denial, and education is provided to a small section of people, and the present government is following that kind of principles now. So Dr. Ambedkar talked of revolution and counter-revolution. He wrote a book actually, in which he said the Buddhist revolution was a very significant revolution in India, which brought a lot of changes in society, education, economy, etc. So actually, thereby there was decline of Brahmanism, and Buddhism has flourished in large parts of the country, and education. So the alternative people-oriented egalitarian perspective and approach is starting with Buddha. So Buddha started sanghas in which people. So Buddhism was against the varna system and caste system. So they treated all people equally, and they admitted children of all castes of people, castes and varnas into the sangha and a common education. So the first kind of common education was provided in the sanghas of Buddhism. So later, of course, there was a counter revolution by the Brahminical forces. They wrote literature like Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas, etc. And they have driven away Buddhism to small pockets. Actually, it was existing in large part of the country. So there was a counter revolution, and the Brahminical system got re-established, and after that the Gupta Empire and other empires came. So Hinduism was resurrected and revived, and the Brahminical, feudal, colonial, and monarchical system continued. So now, so from Buddha to Savitribai Phule, Jyotirao Phule, Dr. Ambedkar, and Gandhi to some extent, but the movement, freedom struggle, freedom movement, and then the realization of India's freedom and the constitutional democracy which was asserting. So they have brought many changes in education. So they all these developments have opened up education to the oppressed people of the country who were earlier denied education. So therefore, we have to understand the present kind of thing as a counter-revolution thing, which Ambedkar was talking. So through all these processes, education got opened, opportunities were provided to the deprived people, but now they want to counter this, and they want to stop this. So there should not, the universalization of education they talk, but actually they want to limit education. Here I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Professor Chakravarti Rao. It was a very, very interesting and all-round critical appraisal of really NEP 2020. Thank you very much. Now I will request Ramamurthy ji to give us a brief of that in Hindi. Ramamurthy ji.
हाल फिलहाल जिंदाबाद और सभी को गुड इवनिंग। मुझे लगता है कि मेरी आवाज शायद सुनाई दे रही होगी। तो मुख्य रूप से प्रोफेसर चक्रधर राव जी ने इस शिक्षा नीति के बारे में ऐतिहासिक से लेकर राजनीतिक, अर्थशास्त्रीय और एक बहुत पक्षीय इसके जो परिप्रेक्ष्य हैं उनकी बात करने की कोशिश की है, जिनको मैं संक्षेप में पेश करने की कोशिश करूंगा। सबसे महत्वपूर्ण बात उन्होंने ये कही कि सबसे पहले तो हमें ये बात समझनी पड़ेगी कि अगर हम भारतीय शिक्षा के विकास को प्राचीन काल से अब तक देखें तो इसमें मुख्य रूप से दो धाराएं जो है वो दिखाई देती है। पहली तो वो धारा है जो ब्राह्मणवादी हिंदुत्व की धारा है, जिसने शिक्षा के सीमित तबकों तक सीमित रखा और उसके साथ साथ लगातार गैर बराबरी, वंचना, बहिष्कार और खंडन और बहुत सारे लोगों को शिक्षा से वंचित रखा, जिसमें मुख्य रूप से महिलाएं, शूद्र और निम्न जातियों के दूसरे लोग थे। समूचा प्राचीन ब्राह्मणवादी साहित्य और गुरुकुल शिक्षा व्यवस्था इसका मोटे तौर पे प्रतिनिधित्व करती है। बाद में जिसके साथ पूंजीवाद पर आधारित कोलोनियल उपनिवेशवाद में भी समझौता कर लिया और उन्होंने केवल ब्राह्मणवादी हिंदुत्ववादी पक्ष को ही प्रोत्साहित दिया और शिक्षा को इस तरीके से नियोजित हुआ जिससे कि ब्राह्मणवादी हिंदुत्व बहुमत वाले लोगों का हित साधा जा सके और साथ में पूंजीवादी और उपनिवेशवाद का हित साधे जा सके। उन्होंने कुल मिला के शिक्षा को इस तरीके से नियोजित किया। दूसरा पक्ष जो था वो एक लोकतांत्रिक, वैकल्पिक और जनवादी शिक्षा का विकल्प था, जिसके सूत्रधार आप बुद्ध को मानते हैं और ये जिक्र करते हैं कि बुद्ध के बाद ज्योतिबाई फुले, सावित्रीबाई फुले, कुछ हद तक गांधी जी और विशेष रूप से डॉक्टर बी.आर. अम्बेडकर जैसे मुखर हस्ताक्षर इस जो है इस जो एक विचारधारा है उसके प्रेरक और मुख्य प्रवक्ता रहे हैं, जिन्होंने लगातार अपने कामों से, विशेष रूप से अपने अलग अलग शैक्षणिक प्रयासों से जनवादी शिक्षा और आम लोगों तक शिक्षा को पहुंचाने की तरफ जोर दिया। और ये उसके संदर्भ में विशेष रूप से अम्बेडकर, डॉक्टर बी.आर. अम्बेडकर जी की किताब क्रांति और प्रतिक्रांति का जिक्र करते हैं चक्रधर सर, जिसमें उन्होंने बताया कि किस तरह बुद्ध के आने से शैक्षणिक क्रांति हुई और जिसे बाद में ब्राह्मणवादी प्रतिक्रांति में परिवर्तित हो गई। और इस संदर्भ में वो कहते हैं कि आज की शिक्षा नीति को अगर हम इस तरह से देखें तो ये बिल्कुल रूप से एक प्रतिक्रांतिकारिता का प्रतिनिधित्व करती है और प्रतिक्रांतिकारी यानी काउंटर रेवोल्यूशनरी आइडियाज जो हैं, जिसमें एक जो है जो तथाकथित वंचित तबके हैं उनको शिक्षा से और दूर ले जाने की प्रक्रियाओं को नियोजित करती है। एक मुख्य रूप से उन्होंने ये ऐतिहासिक पक्ष की बात की। और दूसरा एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात है जो हमें समझनी चाहिए कि अगर हम इस शिक्षा नीति और पिछले कुछ कम से कम 30 सालों की शिक्षा नीतियों के को ध्यान से देखें तो इस नीति को विशेष रूप से हमें इस संदर्भ में देखना पड़ेगा कि इसके 2 केंद्रीय सिद्धांत और 2 केंद्रीय तत्व हैं। पहला तत्व तो ये है कि ये विश्व बैंक, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मुद्रा कोष और अन्य बड़े बड़े धनी देशों की धनी बहुराष्ट्रीय कंपनियों के हितों को पूरा करते हुए विश्व व्यापार समझौते या WTO के नाम पर या उसकी आड़ में, हालांकि WTO में शिक्षा को वाणिज्यिक बनाने का समझौता नहीं हुआ है, लेकिन उसके पैरोकारों को खुश करने के लिए हमारी सरकार ने विशेष रूप से 2014 के बाद और तेज गति से ऐसी प्राथमिकताओं को चुना है जिससे कि शिक्षा का निजीकरण, वाणिज्यिकरण और कारपोरेटीकरण अधिक से अधिक गति से हो सके। इसी तरह इसका दूसरा केंद्रीय तत्व, केंद्र सिद्धांत है कि एक अपने देश के फ्रंट पे या अपने मतलब जिसको हम कहें कि लोकल, स्थानीय स्तर पर इन्होंने केवल जो ब्राह्मणवादी हिंदू कम्युनल सांप्रदायिक ताकतें हैं उनको खुश करने के लिए उन मूल्यों और उन विचारों को प्राथमिकता दी है जिनसे कि केवल शिक्षा का सांप्रदायिकरण हो सके, ब्राह्मणवादी हिंदुत्व की श्रेष्ठता स्थापित की जा सके और बाकी सारे समूहों को इतने हाशिए तक धकेल दिया जाए कि वो अपनी आवाज भी बुलंद ना कर सके। तो इसके 2 मुख्य तत्व जो केंद्रीय तत्व हैं, एक तो निजीकरण, वाणिज्यीकरण, कारपोरेटीकरण और दूसरा सांप्रदायिकरण, ब्राह्मणवादीकरण और हाशिए पर और जो वंचित तबके हैं उनको हाशिए पर धकेलना। इन 2 मुख्य तत्वों और इसके प्राचीन परिप्रेक्ष्य के आलोक में अब हम इसके शिक्षा नीति जो है इसके कुछ मुख्य प्रावधान जिनकी सर ने बात की, उससे कुछ बिंदुवार कुछ प्रावधानों का जिक्र करने की कोशिश करेंगे। मुख्य रूप से उन्होंने एक बात कही कि ऐसा प्रतीत होता है कि बाहरी रूप से मोटे मोटे तौर पे शक्ल से या अपने रूपाकार में ये नीति कई बार ऊपरी तौर पे थोड़ी बहुत प्रगतिशील और उदारवादी लगती है, लेकिन अगर हम इसकी गहराई से और अंदर जाकर पड़ताल करें तो ये सारे जो प्रगतिशील तथा एक तरह से उदारवादी लगने वाले जुमले हैं या मुहावरे हैं, वो ढकोसला साबित हो जाते हैं अगर हम इनसे थोड़ा गहराई से बात करें। तो अब हम इनमें से कुछ चीजों को मुख्य रूप से उठा के देखते हैं। आपने बहुत महत्वपूर्ण रूप से उच्च शिक्षा की बात की, तो पहले मैं उच्च शिक्षा के संदर्भ में आपके कुछ बिंदुओं जो आपने रखे उनकी बात करना चाहूंगा। सबसे पहले आपने बहुत विस्तार से बताया कि स्वायत्तता की अवधारणा को पूरी तरह से उलझ दिया गया है। विश्वविद्यालयों की स्वायत्तता का मुख्य रूप से मतलब ये था कि विश्वविद्यालय में लोगों को एक अकादमिक रूप से स्वच्छंद और स्वतंत्र वातावरण मिले, जिससे लोग अपने पढ़ने लिखने सोचने समझने और वैचारिक प्रगति को जो है एक स्वच्छंदतापूर्ण ढंग से विकसित कर सकें और हर तरह का शोध शिक्षण और उसके ऊपर विचार विमर्श जो है वो स्वतंत्रता पूर्वक हो सके। इसी विचार से यूनिवर्सिटी का जो है विचार लाया गया था, जिसमें आलोचनात्मकता, मतभेद और एक स्वतंत्र रूप से किसी विषय के ऊपर काम करने को प्राथमिकता दी गई थी। इस नीति में उस विचार को बिल्कुल केवल न केवल सीमित कर दिया गया है, बल्कि उसके नाम पर यूनिवर्सिटियों को बंद करने की योजना बनाई जा रही है। मुख्य रूप से स्वायत्तता के नाम पे ये किया जा रहा है कि जो संस्थाएं वित्तीय रूप से स्वयं को पोषित कर सकेंगी वही चल पाएंगी और अन्य संस्थाएं बंद कर दी जाएंगी, और जिनके पास पैसा नहीं है वो नहीं चल पाएंगी। ये कुल मिला के इसका लब्बो-लुभाव है। और दूसरा, विश्वविद्यालय के संदर्भ में ये भी उतना ही इम्पोर्टेंट है कि विश्वविद्यालय में जितने भी आंतरिक स्वतंत्रता थी, आंतरिक लोकतंत्र था, जो विश्वविद्यालय की अलग अलग कमेटियां होती थी, उसके शासन को चलाने वाले समूह होते थे, एसी है, ईसी है या और दूसरी संस्थाएं थी, जिनमें शिक्षकों का भी एक वर्ग होता था जो लोकतांत्रिक रूप से चुना जाता था। ये सारी लोकतांत्रिक प्रक्रियाएं विद्यार्थी ऑर्गेनाइजेशनों का जो हस्तक्षेप था या उनकी जो एक लोकतांत्रिक जगह थी, स्पेस थी, उसको बिल्कुल समाप्त कर दिया गया है। इस संदर्भ में मोदी जी का ये उल्लेखनीय कथन भी हमें बिल्कुल गंभीरता से देखना चाहिए, जिसमें वो कहते हैं कि विद्यार्थियों को राजनीति नहीं करनी चाहिए, जो उन्होंने हाल ही में कहा, जो बड़ी हमारे लिए गहराई से सोचने वाली बात है। दूसरा, आपने महत्वपूर्ण रूप से बात की कि जो मल्टीवर्सिटी या बहुअनुशासनिक बहुविषयक शिक्षा का, जिससे बहुत सारे लोग अनावश्यक रूप से रोमांचित हो रहे हैं, उनको शायद ये पता नहीं है कि इसका पूरा इरादा ही मल्टीडिसिप्लिनरिटी के आईडी को लाने का ये है कि आप किसी एक ज्ञान की किसी शाखा में विशेषज्ञता हासिल ना कर सकें और आपका नॉलेज अगर थोड़ा बहुत किसी भी क्षेत्र में होता है तो बहुत आधा अधूरा ही रह जाए, या आप किसी भी विषय का एक बहुत ही व्यवस्थित क्रमिक अध्ययन उससे नहीं कर पाएंगे, क्योंकि हमें उसके बारे में बहुत अनुभव भी नहीं है। और केवल नाम से खुश हो जाना, ये मान लेना कि हम अर्थशास्त्र के साथ फिजिक्स भी पढ़ लेंगे या गणित के साथ हम फैशन डिजाइनिंग कर लेंगे, ये अपने आप में काफी रोमांचित करने के अलावा बहुत ही धोखा देने वाला एक उपाय है, जिसे हमें समझना चाहिए, आपने कहा। और तीसरा मुद्दा जो विशेष रूप से उन्होंने कहा कि तकनीकी का डिवाइड जो इसने काफी जोर शोर से बढ़ा दिया है, और तकनीकी रूप से जो है हम हैव और हैव नोट में हमारा ये विभाजन बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ जाएगा, और इसकी वजह से बहुत सारे लोग और भी जो है वो पिछड़ जाएंगे, क्योंकि लोगों के पास पैसा नहीं होगा तकनीकी संसाधनों को खरीदने का। और दूसरा, जब हम सीधे ऑनलाइन शिक्षा की वजह से आपस में सीधा सीधा फेस टू फेस अंतर संवाद नहीं कर पाएंगे, तो न केवल लोगों का आपस में जो है वो संवाद कम होगा, बल्कि एक तरह के केंद्रीकृत जो सोच है, विचार है, उसी को ही प्रमोट किया जाएगा, और केवल बहुत सीमित संख्या में एक मॉडल से बहुत सारे लोगों को पढ़ाने की कोशिश की जाएगी, जो काफी हद तक केंद्रीकृत होगा। और ये उच्च शिक्षा बहुत ही केंद्रीकृत होने वाली है। जो उन्होंने अगले बात कही बहुत महत्वपूर्ण रूप से, ये केंद्रीकृत इसलिए होने वाली है क्योंकि इन्होंने जो 7-8 संस्थाएं प्रस्तावित की हैं, जिसमें जनरल काउंसिल ऑफ एजुकेशन है, नेशनल रिसर्च फाउंडेशन है, नैक है, इसी तरह से वो शिक्षा आयोग है और या जो दूसरी उसकी वर्टिकल आर्म्स हैं, उसकी जो दूसरे साथ की संस्थाएं हैं जिनकी बात की गई, ये सारी संस्थाएं अभी तक इसमें राज्य की कोई भागीदारी नहीं लगती। ये केवल जो है मुख्य रूप से केंद्र की तरफ से ही रेगुलेट की जाएंगी, जिसके उदाहरण हमने अभी हाल फिलहाल में ही देख लिए हैं। किस तरह से जबरदस्ती लोगों के ऊपर ऑनलाइन शिक्षा को थोपा गया, हम सब आपने देखा। जिन राज्यों ने ये फैसला भी कर लिया था कि हम परीक्षा ना लेके अपने विद्यार्थियों को अगली कक्षाओं में प्रमोट करेंगे, उन्हें भी मजबूर किया गया केंद्रीय संस्थाओं द्वारा कि जो निश्चित तौर से परीक्षाएं लें। तो मुख्य रूप से यूनिवर्सिटी के संदर्भ में इन्होंने ये बातें कही कि जो उच्च शिक्षा है या विश्वविद्यालय शिक्षा है, इसका पूरी तरह से बाजारीकरण होने वाला है और अगर इस नीति का विरोध पुरजोर तरीके से नहीं हुआ तो शायद ये उच्च स्तर पे शिक्षा को, एक सार्वजनिक शिक्षा को बंद करने की पहल हो चुकी है। तो इसको हमको गहराई से लेना पड़ेगा और जिस तरह की ऑटोनॉमी ये जिसका ये प्रस्ताव दे रहे हैं या कल्पना कर रहे हैं कि सारे कॉलेज अपने आप में स्वायत्त संस्थाओं के रूप में काम करेंगे, उसका मतलब ये है कि वो काम करेंगे तभी तक जब तक आपके पास पैसे हैं, और जब आपका बाहरी दखल हो जाएगा तब वो नहीं कर पाएंगे। ये दखल आर्थिक और राजनीतिक दोनों दृष्टि से महत्वपूर्ण है। अगर आप विस्तार से इन प्रस्तावों को पढ़ेंगे तो ये देखेंगे कि ये केवल आर्थिक रूप से खतरनाक नहीं है, राजनीतिक रूप से जिस तरह से वो आरएसएस और दूसरे संघ की शाखाओं के लोगों को लाएंगे, वो अपने आप में उससे भी ज्यादा खतरनाक है। अब कुछ मुद्दे स्कूली शिक्षा के संदर्भ में सबने कुछ चीजों की तरफ इशारा किया है जो बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। आपने मुख्य रूप से स्कूली शिक्षा के संदर्भ में सारे बातों को लगभग रेखांकित किया। तो सबसे पहले हम ढांचे की बात करते हैं तो ढांचे का ये मानना है सरकार की जो 5+2+3+4 का समूचा ढांचा है, ये कुल मिला के अलग अलग टर्मिनल स्टेजेस से बहिष्कार या लोगों को बाहर निकालने का ढांचा है। और विशेष रूप से जब हम ये देखते हैं कि जिस तरह से व्यावसायिक शिक्षा को इसके साथ जोड़ा गया है, वो बिल्कुल बाहर निकालने, लोगों को शिक्षा से बाहर धकेलने की तरकीब के अलावा और कुछ नहीं है। अगर आप नोट करेंगे तो उन्होंने ये बताया कि वो आपने ऐसे व्यवसाय इसमें प्रस्तावित किए हैं जो पारंपरिक रूप से लोग जातिगत रूप से करते आ रहे थे, और खासतौर पर स्कूली शिक्षा में किसी भी आधुनिक व्यवसाय का जिक्र नहीं है। तो उसका आशय यही है कि आप शिक्षा छोड़ो, अपनी जाति का काम करते रहो और एक तरह से दिहाड़ी मजदूर बन जाओ। दूसरी बात उन्होंने मुख्य रूप से ये कही कि जिस तरह से मतलब रैशनलाइजेशन, युक्तिकरण या क्या कहते हैं संसाधनों के समुचित वितरण के नाम पे स्कूलों को बंद करके या स्कूलों का विलीनीकरण करके बहुत सारे जो पड़ोस के स्कूल हैं या एक ही इलाके में चलने वाले आवासीय या परिधि में आने वाले स्कूल थे, उनको बंद किया जा रहा है, जो अपने आप में बहुत ही चिंताजनक और गहरी चाल का हिस्सा है। मुख्य रूप से सरकार मतलब अगर जो आवासीय क्षेत्र के स्कूल हैं या नेबरहुड स्कूल हैं, पड़ोस के स्कूल हैं, उनमें अगर एनरोलमेंट कम हुई है या दर्ज संख्या कम हुई है तो उसका मुख्य कारण ये है कि सरकार ने जो है कम फीस लेने वाले निजी स्कूलों को जानबूझकर प्रोत्साहित किया, उनसे घूस या कमीशन लेके उनको कई तरह से प्रोत्साहित किया और ऐसी लॉबीज को लगातार प्रोत्साहित किया जो ये स्कूल चलाएं, जिसका नतीजा ये निकला है कि लोग सरकारी स्कूलों की बजाय सरकार और उसकी एजेंसियों के ही प्रोत्साहन से प्राइवेट स्कूलों में जाने लग गए हैं। और आपको वो जो खुले हुए पड़ोस के स्कूल थे या आवासीय सरकारी स्कूल थे वो अनपयुक्त लगने लग गए हैं। तो इससे स्पष्ट झलकता है कि अगर आप निजी स्कूलों को चेक करें या उन पर नियंत्रण करें तो सरकारी स्कूलों की स्थिति निश्चित तौर पर उतनी ही सुधर सकती है जैसे कि पहले सुधरी हुई थी, जैसे कि उनमें उपस्थिति या दर्ज संख्या 10-15 साल पहले थी, वो उसी तरह से वापस आ सकती है। इस जो है बहुत ही सुनियोजित षड्यंत्र का नतीजा ये निकला है कि जो 85% बहुजन समुदाय से संबंधित लड़कियां थी, शेड्यूल मतलब अनुसूचित जातियों, अनुसूचित जनजातियों और विकलांग समूहों के बच्चे थे, वो शिक्षा से बाहर निकल गए हैं, क्योंकि वो प्राइवेट स्कूलों की फीस अदा नहीं कर सकते और पास में उनके सरकारी स्कूल नहीं रहे हैं, तो उनके लिए बहुत ही खतरनाक है। इसलिए इसको जरूर हमें गहराई से लेना चाहिए। तीसरी बात उन्होंने बड़ी महत्वपूर्ण रूप से शिक्षकों के बारे में कही, और जो शिक्षकों को बिल्कुल ध्यान से समझनी चाहिए। आपका मानना है कि जिस तरह का इस नीति में शिक्षकों से संबंधित प्रस्ताव पेश किए गए हैं, उनमें शिक्षक या शिक्षिका का स्थायी जो टेन्योर है वो बिल्कुल समाप्त हो जाएगा, समाप्त बल्कि हो गया है। तो जिस तरह से अभी अनुबंध के नाम पे कई तरह के नाम लगाकर, मतलब कई तरह के शिक्षकों के तहत शिक्षकों की निजी या आंशिक नियुक्ति की जाती है और उनको बहुत समय तक वेतन नहीं दिया जाता है, उसका पूरा इरादा यही है कि उससे ये पता लगता है कि पूरा इरादा यही है कि शिक्षा के इस ढांचे को या सरकारी शिक्षा को, सार्वजनिक शिक्षा के जो ये विभाग हैं, इनको जल्दी से जल्दी किस तरह से बंद किया जाए। और इसमें बहुत स्पष्ट रूप से ये कहा गया है कि पदोन्नति या किसी भी तरह की जो इंक्रीमेंट लगती है उसका आधार भ्रष्टता नहीं होगी, आपका परफॉर्मेंस अप्रेजल होगा, आपके कार्य निष्पादन का जो विश्लेषण है वो होगा। और उसका मतलब सीधा सीधा ये है कि अगर आप बॉस या आपके निजी सरकार बॉस या जो भी इस इलाके के या शिक्षा के सरकार के करता धरता है वो आपसे खुश है, तो आपको आपकी परफॉर्मेंस को सही आंका जाएगा। अगर आप से खुश नहीं है या आप उनके विचारों के अनुसार नहीं चल रहे हो, तो आपको सीधे सीधे जो है वो घोषित कर दिया जाएगा कि आपकी परफॉर्मेंस ठीक नहीं है। ये बहुत स्पष्ट रूप से उसमें समझ में आता है। फिर इसके अलावा उन्होंने कहा कि शिक्षा का जो अधिकार, मूल अधिकार था, मूल अधिकार जो 2009 के एक्ट के द्वारा और 86वें संशोधन के द्वारा हमने कम से कम आधे अधूरे रूप से ही हासिल किया था। हालांकि हम लोग उससे बहुत ज्यादा खुश नहीं थे, विशेष रूप से इस वजह से कि इसमें 3 से 6 और 14 से 18 आयु वर्ग को शामिल नहीं किया गया था और निजी स्कूलों पे किसी तरह की कोई ठोस रोक नहीं लगाई गई थी। और ये अधिकार भी नेबरहुड या जो सुधारी आयोग का कॉमन स्कूल का विजन था उसको बहुत ज्यादा मजबूती नहीं देता था, उसको मतलब एक तरह से वो ज्यादा जोर से उसकी वकालत नहीं करता था। बहरहाल वो आधे अधूरे रूप में भी जो शिक्षा का अधिकार प्राप्त था, उस शिक्षा अधिकार को भी अब धीरे धीरे जो है वो खत्म कर दिया जाएगा और उस शिक्षा अधिकार को जो डाइल्यूट करने का, कमजोर करने की प्रक्रिया है वो ऑलरेडी शुरू हो चुकी है। इसमें सिर्फ एक मतलब जिसको हम कहें कि औपचारिक उल्लेख शिक्षा अधिकार का है, 1 या 2 लाइनों में ये कहता कि ये सिर्फ 1986 के बाद एक महत्वपूर्ण उल्लेखनीय कदम है। उसके बारे में उसके अलावा कोई वक्तव्य इस नीति में आपको लाइन नहीं मिलती है कि हमें किस तरह से इसको मजबूत करेंगे। उल्टा इसको कमजोर या डाइल्यूट करने के इशारे बिल्कुल साफ हैं। जब वो सेक्शन 7 में जब वो स्कूल के संदर्भ में रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क की और उसको संचालित करने वाले ढांचे की बात करते हैं, जिसमें ये कहते हैं कि प्राइवेट मतलब जो स्कूलों के ऊपर अलग अलग तरह की सीमाएं हैं उनको ढीला किया जाएगा, उनको जो है उनकी कठोरता को और लचीला बनाया जाएगा। वो साफ इशारा है कि किस तरह से प्राइवेट स्कूलों को आप बहुत सारे जो शिक्षा के मूल अधिकार के प्रावधान हैं उनसे छूट देने वाले हैं। तो ये इसका सीधा सीधा मोटा मतलब ये है जो आपने समझाने की कोशिश की कि शिक्षा का मूल अधिकार एक तरह से आप समझिए कि उसकी उल्टी गिनती शुरू हो चुकी है और अगर ये सरकार इसी तरह से काम करती गई तो वो समाप्त होने वाला है। इसके अलावा आपने एक बड़ी महत्वपूर्ण 2 बातें और कही जो जिनके साथ मैं अपना ये अनुवाद की बात खत्म करूंगा। एक तो सामाजिक न्याय और सामाजिक जो रूप से वंचित तबके हैं उनके हितों के लिए बिल्कुल जो है कुठाराघात हो चुका है। विशेष रूप से 2 दृष्टिकोणों से ये लगता है। एक तो नीति में आधिकारिक रूप से इन श्रेणियों की जो मूल संवैधानिक नाम है उनका जिक्र नहीं किया गया है, लगभग ना के बराबर है। अनुसूचित जनजाति, भाषिक और धार्मिक, भाषाई और धार्मिक अल्पसंख्यक, विकलांग एक्सेट्रा, उनको केवल एक सामाजिक और आर्थिक रूप से पिछड़े वर्ग में शामिल कर दिया गया है। तो ये नियत की तरफ से साफ इशारा है कि वो क्या करना चाहते हैं कि उनको किसी तरह से महत्व देना ही नहीं चाहते, जो संवैधानिक नाम है या एक तरह से संवैधानिक पद है। और दूसरा, आरक्षण का इसमें बिल्कुल जिक्र नहीं है और पूरी तरह से ये इस बात के तरफ इशारा है जो उनकी पूर्व की नीतियों का भी संकेत है कि हम कुल मिला के आरक्षण का जो विचार है उसको इतना कमजोर कर दें कि इसका असल में कोई जो मकसद है वो रह ही ना जाए, और उसको इतना बदनाम भी कर दे कमजोर होने के साथ साथ कि उसका असली मकसद लोग बिल्कुल उससे भटक जाएं और उसको भूल जाएं और केवल मेरिटोक्रेसी या जो है मेरिट की ही बात करें। तो ये बातें मुख्य रूप से आपने कही और अंत में आपने निष्कर्ष रूप में ये कहा कि अगर आप 2 लाइनों में इसको समझना चाहें तो हम कुल मिला के लबोलबाब ये निकाल सकते हैं कि शिक्षा नीति उच्च स्तर पे भी, मतलब स्कूली शिक्षा के स्तर पे भी और उच्च शिक्षा के स्तर पे भी कुल मिला के सार्वजनिक शिक्षा को पतन की ओर ले जाने वाली है और सार्वजनिक शिक्षा का लगातार जो है खराब या विकृति उससे लगातार होने वाली है। इसके अलावा इस शिक्षा नीति में और कुछ नहीं दिखता, इसलिए इसमें जो प्रयोग की गई लच्छेदार भाषा है उसे हमें बड़ा सही ढंग से सोच समझ के डिकोड करना चाहिए और इस सरकार की पिछली जो प्रैक्टिसेस हैं, जो पीछे के अनुभव हैं, जैसे उनके काम हैं और उनके साथ भी जोड़ के देखना चाहिए, क्योंकि शिक्षा नीति कोई एकांतिक नीति नहीं है। जो बैंकों के साथ किया जा रहा है, रेलवे के साथ किया जा रहा है, फार्म बिल हमने देख लिया, तो इन सब चीजों के साथ जोड़ के हमको वो देखना चाहिए। लाल सलाम, जिंदाबाद।
राममूर्ति जी बहुत धन्यवाद आपका, मतलब आपने बहुत प्रिसाइजली और वो सारे पॉइंट कवर किए। थैंक यू राममूर्ति जी फॉर such a precise and to the point and taking all the spirit of Professor Chakradhar Rao's the total presentation. We are honored that Professor Chakradhar Rao is a member of our Presidium of All India Education. Is a part of, now we open for discussion. So there are 2 questions in the chat. Will Professor Gangadhar like to put himself? Professor Gangadhar? Or I read it from the chat. Professor Gangadhar has written that if the developed nations like UK had education without the religion, how was it that missionary schools were preaching Christianity? Professor Rao, would you like to respond to this comment?
Religion, the education has not become completely secular even in the West. The religious organizations have been trying to impart education in their own way through their religious missions, etc. And in them, so the madrasas of Muslims, okay, of course now we have the Saraswati Shishu Mandir, etc. here. So like that, so the religions have been trying to still impart education and trying to control education in a theological perspective. That is there, but by and large, the secularization of education and knowledge started in the West, and the same kind of education system has been introduced in India also. Therefore, this secularization started here also. But now, as I mentioned, the kind of counter-revolution that is being waged now. So it is trying to bring back the theological education in India also. So, excuse me, I want to make one more point, which is not related to Dr. Gangadhar's. In the alternative, people-oriented perspective and approach on education, the communist movements and the socialist movements and the Ambedkarite movements and Dalit Bahujan movements also have contributed to the alternative approach. They have been demanding that universal education should be provided to all people, quality education and free and compulsory education at the which the Constitution has been speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Professor Lakshmi Narayanan, would you like to put your question directly?
Yeah. No, first thing is about in some universities we have executive councils and academic council. But in some universities, as Professor Chakradhar Rao said, there were senates. So what is the composition of this senate? That is first question. And second is while explaining about Indian different kinds of systems, he said that feudalism is like a Brahminical feudalism, but about capitalism, he did not say whether it is Brahminical or caste-based like that. So I want some elaboration on those points.
Okay. So firstly, in the universities, were senates and academic councils. Senates used to take some policy decisions pertaining to the university, and academic council used to deliberate on the academic matters like courses, curriculum, etc. So now in the state-funded universities, they have clubbed them together. They are now calling them academic senate sometimes or academic council sometimes. So they are democratic institutions within the university, so which were taking decision. No single individual like the vice chancellor or registrar or the dean or head of the department can take any decisions independently, arbitrarily. So that is the kind of system developed in the universities. The second point is
political leaders will be there, sir, in the Senate. In Senate, will there be political persons?
Senate, there will not be political leaders. Professors, principals, heads, deans, etc. They will be there.
Okay.
Politicians will be there in the executive councils. Now, the new national education policy speaks of governing councils for universities, in which that non-academic people also should be made members in those governing councils. So that is a very retrograde step. So the political control will be there. Now the education minister at the center and education minister at the state will be the chairman of the general education councils. So education will be under the direct control of the government, actually. So it will be a dangerous thing for education in the national education policy. Then another point which raised is capitalism. So I said it is a continuum from Brahminical Varna system, Brahminical Varna caste system, Brahminical caste feudal system, Brahminical caste, feudal, and capitalist system. It is an integrated system in India, continuous and integrated system. So earlier social systems are not disappearing, not declining. They are continuing and adjusting with the new system. So now in the capitalist system, the Brahminical upper castes are the capitalists, and the Sudras, the Dalits, and Girijans, and so women, and the minorities, etc., have become the working class and the peasantry in the capitalist system. So it's an integrated socio-economic system in India, unlike in other countries. So Brahminical caste, feudal, and capitalist system in India. So it's a complex mixed system. We can't separate them, actually. We can't see capitalism as separate from caste system and separate from capitalist system, because from the feudal system. So the upper caste feudals also have become capitalist, some of them. So of course, the evolution of capitalism, we have the two ways of development of capitalism. One is the landlords becoming capitalists, another independent development of the capitalist class, that kind of.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. It's a very important point that there is a complementarity between the old system and the new system. Yes. So they try to ride on the old system, but they bring the new values. It's a very interesting and very important point which you have made. Any other member would like to discuss or raise? It is open now for discussion, please. I think there is no more questions to be discussed because it was so thorough and explanatory. I think we don't have many questions on that. So Dr. Vikas could not join because his brother-in-law is in hospital. He has to visit him. So he has wanted to get excused for being excused for that. So with this, if it is everybody's permission, we can close this discussion. It will be available maybe tomorrow morning on our YouTube channel also. We have all other 11 of our seminar series plus other discussions which are taking place. They are available on the AIFTR YouTube channel. So please let our friends and members know they can always access that, because this is a very enriching series. Every time a new aspects and various angles have been discussed in that. With that, I am grateful to Mr. Chakradhar Rao for his meticulous presentation. Thank you, sir. And with this, we close this meeting. It is being